All right. How everyone is doing well, I hope. So tonight we wanted to talk a little bit about, we'll do a little introduction. We're going to let my wife talk and then we're going to kind of rejoin. Um, the So interestingly enough, one of the things we never really get into a big, conversation about, but I think it's helpful is kind of the nature of the different workouts we do, how to approach them, what the value of them is, lack of a better word, why we do them, and how they can affect your training in positive ways. And in some other scenario, like and part of what I want to talk about also is sort of like how to approach them, how to approach the workouts, um, how to how to I'll say from a form standpoint, but also sort of again then, and as I mentioned in the email, like as a function standpoint as well. So how they play a part in our training, but also how to approach them. Because a lot of the times we just say like run faster for X number of minutes, or run faster for X number of miles, or smaller intervals of miles. And I think that a lot of the time we I won't say take it for granted, but we approach it almost mindlessly, right? We just sort of go faster and then we slow down a little bit, and then we go faster and we slow down a little bit, or we run up a hill and we run down a hill. And one of the first things I wanted to show again, so one of the first ones I want to talk about is hill repeats, and I know we just kind of came out of them, but it has an effect on racing. It has a big effect even on training, and especially now. A lot of people are. I personally think now is a really good time, as we sort of have less the race out there that we're targeting. And in some instances, if everyone's, let's say, doing a virtual race, we also can kind of choose where we run or walk. And in many instances that might be our neighborhood. Oh, my wife has joined. Look at that, you guys. And it could be our neighborhood, it could be downtown Cincinnati, it could be Marymount, whatever. But living in Cincinnati, we encounter a lot of hills, or we encounter a lot of varying terrain. And one of the big things is that we always hear everybody say, well, you can't escape the hills. So whatever we do on a run will often involve uh, the occurrence of hills somewhere along the way. And then of course we use hills for workouts fairly regularly, and for good reason, and to a specific effect. I personally have found that when I use hills, and often use hills more often than we even do in the training program, it really has an impact, so much so that we may actually include some more hills in this training program than we have in the past. So if you guys haven't, maybe as a quick show of hands, even for those who aren't on here, if you want to type something, whatever. But I don't know, are people using Team Builder and or paying attention to the notes and the various things we add in Team Builder, where you can sort of reference things? It's okay if you say you haven't, it's fine. Okay, great. Thank you, Sheila.
Occasionally.
Okay. So one of the things we try to do is when we, thanks, Laura. So one of the things we try to do is we try to provide a bit of context, specifically, usually when it comes to form or how to approach a specific workout, and some of the details about why we do it, some of the science behind why we do it, and even how we do it. And one of the things I want to show, I want to show a video real quickly. And believe me, I might struggle to get this to work properly. So give me one moment. Sorry, guys. Just had it. So I am going to try to share this video, and I want you guys to. If it's going to let me. Well, just for fun, I'm gonna just share my screen, which is going to allow me to pull this up. Can you guys see that? Can you see the downhill running mechanics thing there? Good. Okay, great. So this is a video Eric and I did about 2 months ago, give or take. And I bring it up because it's actually a really good reminder of a couple of things, and it's a real specific form thing. And you guys have, all of you have been in the training group long enough to hear me talk about this on multiple occasions, and that is running uphill versus running downhill, and the differences of how that can affect you physically and also physiologically. So, how do you feel when you do it? Number one of the ways I try to simplify it is that, running uphill is very hard on you cardiovascularly. So, we always say, oh, running uphill is horrible, right? Interestingly enough, physically, it is actually less taxing on your body in many ways, meaning how your body accepts it and how your body approaches it. And yet, cardiovascularly, it makes us breathe hard. We tend to, struggle to even catch our breath, let alone breathe with any regularity. The downhill piece, however, is much harder on us physically. So actually running downhill can actually do significant damage, depending on how you approach it, to your body, it has a very specific effect on your quads, and your knees. And so I'm going to show this video really quick. It's super short. But this has been linked in a lot of our hill workouts. And so hopefully you guys can see it. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it. You'll tell me, but I'm going to go ahead and play it. You guys hear that?
No.
Okay. So I'm going to kind of talk as it's happening. So what Eric's kind of pointing out is that you want to be a little more upright as you're running down here. You don't want to lean forward into the hill, and you really want to use your arms, as you can kind of see him demonstrating it. And you want to drive. The real important part here is you kind of want to use your butt and your quads and your hamstrings, and you want to sort of power your way up the hill and sort of drive your feet into the ground. And then when you're going downhill, what we all know what happens is, our body sort of takes over, your gravity takes over, and we sort of start going downhill, which causes us to typically speed up, right? And watch what he does as he's running downhill, and you'll kind of see him here as he's preparing. 1 second here. So if you can see him saying, like, the way if you slow down too much as you're going down the hill, your body essentially tries to break itself, and I don't mean B-R-E-A-K, but B-R-A-K-E. So it tries to slow itself down as you're going down the hill. And so you want to kind of let the hill carry you downhill, and you'll watch what he does. So he speeds up that cadence a little bit. And as he comes down the hill, he slows it down enough to control it. So what you don't want to do is let yourself get carried down the hill too quickly, where you start to essentially, what I'll say, fall forward, right? In your body, actually, there's a sort of natural tendency that your body starts to take over and try to control your downhill momentum. And as that momentum gets controlled, you put a lot of pressure and a lot of physical interaction with your quads. I keep saying hamstrings. With your quads. And so your quads essentially, and next time you're on a downhill, try it. But as you're running downhill, as you're going down the hill, start to feel what you're doing, and you'll start to feel your quads sort of tense up, if you will, and they contract. Hi, Dan. And you'll see kind of how that affects you. But what you'll start to feel is as it's essentially pulling you back. It's essentially braking, if you will, slowing you down. But as you do that, you're putting a lot of pressure on those quads and then ultimately on your knees, and they take the brunt of that downhill. So you'll hear a lot of people say, and I can even let Paul chime in here, as when he did the downhill race, it is very physically taxing on you, and sometimes you don't even realize it after the fact. So you tend to not feel it as much as it's happening, but after the fact, your body will tell you that you did downhill. The Boston Marathon is sort of famous for this. Everybody's like, oh, Boston is a net downhill race. What does that mean? It just simply means there's more downhill than uphill. So if you looked at the overall elevation of the race, it's a downhill race. Not downhill in the sense of what the race Paul did, of course, but there's a lot of downhill. And in the couple times, that I've done it multiple times, but a couple of those times I've done it, like when I finished, I mean, my body just felt like it got blown out of the water. And you don't really, like I said, you don't realize it sometimes till like later that day or the next day. And you're smoked. Paul, chime in with how you felt.
Well, the problem with a marathon that is mostly downhill is that sets in earlier. And like you said, you don't realize it, but you get to mile 19 or 20 and your legs are just trashed and you just can't keep going that pace down the rest of it, because the rest of it is also downhill. But the last part of the one that was outside Vegas, Mount Charleston, it was flat. And three things happened all at the same time. It flattened out, which you felt like you were going uphill. The heat went through the roof, and then and you're exhausted. So my legs were trashed anyway. So it's a triple whammy, and it just kind of stops you in your tracks. At least it did for me. But when I do that again, I will do significantly more downhill training and heat training and try to prepare for that.
Sure. And I think that, so to your point, what Eric was demonstrating in that video is as you're going uphill, I'm going to sit up a little bit here, but you want to pump your arms because they actually physically help you kind of get that motion as you're going up the hill. And you want to drive with your legs, almost like pistons, and into the ground. And you also heard Eric Schneider a couple weeks ago when he talked about running form and cadence. And I know Leslie and Caroline listened to a lot of that. But that cadence, so you want to have this quick cadence as you're going up the hill and really drive with your legs. So you really want to use the force of your leg and your foot to drive into the ground and sort of propel you that next part up the hill. So you want to use your legs more than you want to use your cardio, basically, because your cardio is what really gets beaten up on the uphill. On the downhill, you want to let it essentially carry you downhill, shorten your stride, but not slow it down dramatically. So you want to short, quick, coming down the hill, staying upright. You don't want to lean too far forward because, of course, literally gravity can take you down. But you want to be able to quicken that stride because as you slow down and as you extend your stride, you're putting a lot of pressure again on your quads and your knees, which is good news, bad news. Paul, is what you started to feel later in the race is that your body used so much control earlier in the race that when you get to later in the race, your body just can't do it anymore. You're just physically tired. Doesn't mean you're not a good runner. Doesn't mean, none of those things. It's just one of those things that happens naturally as you're going downhill. But if you can think a little bit about that form piece, it'll really make hill work, repeats, hilly fartlicks, just hilly runs in general. And again, living in Cincinnati, we encounter those all the time. But those hills can be a lot more tolerable if you approach them properly. It's really what it comes down to. I think, is my wife ready? All right, I'm going to turn this over to my wife a little bit. She's going to talk about some of the other aspects of training. But again, the hill's the one that has a real specific form piece that I wanted to talk about first. I'm going to turn this over to her, and I'm going to mute myself. You should be able to go.
Laura's muted.
Thanks, Leslie.
Sure.
We thought that it would be useful to talk about the general structure of training and some of the workouts. Since we've started all of these different kind of Tuesday night and Monday night Zoom calls, we focused on a lot of the ancillary aspects of running and training that tend to get overlooked, like nutrition and form, and even some recovery stuff. And so we wanted to bring it back and kind of take the 10,000 foot view and look at the whole structure, because we get a lot of questions about that, and that seems to be something that people, when they take a step back, don't have a lot of experience with. So this is just kind of nothing fancy as far as a presentation goes, but hopefully it'll give you general ideas, and feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go. Okay, so the kind of overview of how we do training at the Run project is we use a process called periodization. And really all that is where it looks at how to break up a training program into individual block segments or phases, each of which has its own little periodized training plan. So it's like little mini training plans within training plans. And if you look at ours, this is very much how the structure is organized. We have a base building phase in the beginning where we kind of have, you know, not a lot of intensity, more toward easier running, longer running. We build in some strength, but that strength isn't too intense. We do have different types of workouts in there, but you'll notice that they are mostly fartleks. We have a lot of easy recovery runs. Of course, we have our long, slow distance, and we have our hill repeats. So we have a lot of that. And the focus of the base building phase is always to develop the aerobic training. And so this is that base building, your endurance kind of engine, if you will. This usually lasts, if we're looking at a 16, 17 week training program, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. After that, you go into an endurance and strength building phase. This is where we have more of the hills, which even though hills are really hard, they're actually kind of, you can think of them as a gentle speed, because it helps build the large muscle group strength, like your glutes, your quads, and your hamstrings. Again, this is mostly an endurance phase, less speed workout, a little bit more strength. This is where we start to fold in our progression runs. You'll kind of think of the hill workouts as the traditional kind of like hill repeats as the traditional hill workouts, but you'll also kind of remember from seasons past, this is where you start to see a lot of those hilly fartleks that Rick likes to throw in there and is famous for. And so this is building that big engine. And this phase usually lasts, again, about 4 to 6 weeks. It depends. I say I give a range here because for our training plan, sometimes it is a little bit different depending on what race we're targeting. So it's slightly different in the fall if we're targeting more flat races like Indy than it would be in the spring when we're targeting races like the Pig. It also is individual specific. So individuals who are planning on running Boston, or as Rick and Paul were just talking about, downhill or even uphill marathons, the different phases may last longer or shorter depending on what the needs are for the end result. The third phase is when we start building speed. So this is going to be where you introduce shorter, faster workouts. And this is when we start going to the track. We start doing our first Yasso 800s, or we'll go and do some of the shorter stuff around Oakley Station with the 1K repeats, or the half miles, or the run the straights and jog the corners workout that we do down there. Those are all for building speed. Those are our mile repeats and even our tempo runs. This has much less endurance. This is where you start to also introduce the fast finish long runs, or the workouts in the long runs, to further develop that next level, that next gear, so that you can, turn it on when you need to, and learn how to run quick on tired legs. There is actually a fourth phase, and I'm sorry, that third phase that lasts, again, about 4 to 6 weeks. Then you go into these kind of 2 short phases, which are about 2 to 3 weeks long. Race prep, which again is going to be shorter stuff, but it's kind of a mix where you'll throw in some race pace miles, you'll start to really kind of fine tune and see where you are at. This tends to be where we place the tune-up race. So Heart Mini for the spring session, and then once we get into the fall, we do Hootie. And then finally, the taper session, which is again about 2 to 3 weeks before the actual event. And this is where you'll see the intensity. We don't really have anything in there, or the workout types, because your muscles are resting and you're winding down. Now we do still do some workouts, but that's not the focus of that phase, which is why there's nothing in there. So that's kind of how the large training cycle is structured. But if you take, you start honing in, you'll also notice that there is a structure from the week to week basis. And within a training plan, from the first to the last week of the season, you chop up the cycle into something called a microcycle. Now, we use a very basic microcycle structure. It's a 7-day cycle, so it's just the week. Each week, you'll notice Tuesdays are a workout day, Saturdays are a long run day. We have strength on Wednesdays, Monday's an easy day, etc. And so this is called a microcycle. Now, there are some programs that use 10-day microcycles. I use a 14-day microcycle a lot, or a 13-day microcycle, and so it can vary. But for the purposes of the Run Project, this is what we do. Each microcycle individually is planned, so Rick goes through, and that's why you get a weekly calendar within the monthly calendar. You'll see that it's all kind of built out, and there's kind of a repetition to stuff. Oh, I do have Tuesday and Wednesday flip-flopped on here. I'm sorry. This is just an example. Just an example. It might not be exactly like this. This might be what the marathon looks like. Again, I do realize I did flip-flop that. But this is how. But if you are in a situation also where you have a conflict, it's good to kind of realize how a microcycle works, and I'll show you a little bit more with how to navigate something if you need to move something within your own schedule. You have a birthday party, or you are going on vacation, or when there's not a pandemic. So sorry. So this is where we get into some workout types, and then after this, I'm gonna ask Rick to talk through a couple of the pacing charts, and you'll see how this fits in. But this is behind the scenes how we build all of this. So I've listed all of the different types of workouts, and I actually included our easy runs, which is going to be the BHR, base heart rate, or the we use this RPE, and even our long slow distance on Saturdays. There's a purpose to each one of them. We don't just randomly throw things into the training plan or the different phases or the mesocycles. We just we actually have a purpose to each one. And so I kind of gave you some detail there. But really, if we look at the intensity, what I think is most important, again, this is just a really brief overview for this session, but the most important thing out of this chart, I would suggest, is the recovery phase, right? You'll notice that the different types of workouts actually have different recovery phases. And these are minimum recoveries. And so if we are pairing things like a long, slow distance that requires 48 hours of recovery, but then we stick in some progression at the end of that, which has 24 hours of recovery, you actually need to add those together. So it actually takes your body a little bit more to recover. Now, is it going to be, a full 3 days? Probably not, but it is going to be more than the 48 hours that you would normally have if you're doing, 12 to 22 miles, as any of your long, slow distance. If you're doing an easy recovery run, your RPE should be really low. So this could be as much as 4 hours. And the reason we put 4 hours there is we know that some people will do other activities in their day, such as hiking, or you might do a run and a strength class. Some people do 2 runs every once in a while. And so that's important because after the first run, before you do anything else, you need to allow for at least 4 hours of recovery in between those two. Hills, you'll notice that most of these take 24 hours. So one thing that is always interesting is on our Tuesday nights, it is, you might not get done if we're running in person until 8 o'clock at night. And then there's a lot of us who get up and run in the morning. But you're not really allowing yourself sufficient recovery to do that next run, even if it is an easy run. So these are really good guidelines for kind of understanding what type of duration of recovery is necessary to fully get the benefit of that workout. Because what you're doing is breaking down muscle tissue to build it back up. Makes you stronger, makes you faster. Those are the goals. But if you break down that muscle tissue, you deplete those glycogen stores, or you just generally fatigue yourself and you don't allow yourself to recover. And recover, I mean, heal those muscles, restore those glycogen stores, get enough sleep, then you actually can't push yourself further the next time. And so you're not going to actually accumulate the benefits of those workouts to their maximum potential. Is it not going to work? No, it's going to work. But again, it's the maximum potential is what you want here. And so the other important column, I think, is the one just to the left of the recovery, and that's the intensity. This is where that RPE scale or rate of perceived exertion comes into play. So I'm actually going to hand it back over to Rick for the next couple of slides. I'm going to switch the sound and mute my mic. So just give me 1 second here, and he's going to talk about that. Nope.
Unshare. No, you can-
I don't want to unshare because I want you to do it.
You guys hear me okay? All right, great. What? Hold on, let me. Oh, I just see. There we go. Okay. Sorry. All right. So you guys have heard us talk about, we talk a lot about RPE, and in fact, pretty much with every Tuesday workout and even into our Saturday workouts, we, our long miles, we talk a lot about it, and we will commonly use, for easy effort, we will use a 3 or 4, and talk about, hey, you should be able to talk to people, you should be conversational. And then in a harder workout will range between 7 and 9. Very, very rarely, again, it's an almost never, do you, we'll say, it's certainly not train at a 10. You're never going full on speed. So what one of the keys here is, you might say, like, well, what does it mean? Like, I don't necessarily understand. And I'm not, this isn't me being condescending in any way, shape, or form, because a lot of people struggle with RPE, and it's really in the actual words here, which is rate of perceived exertion. So I'll pick on Leslie for a minute. Leslie's perceived exertion is totally different than mine, right? And Leslie might be able to go out and say, hey, she could run at a for 10 hours at some specific RPE and be able to do it no problem. If I were to do that same scenario, Caroline's saying there might be an echo. Am I echoing? Oh, great. Ah, crap. Am I echoing now? Good.
I think it's better. I think Laura needed a mute.
Okay. So I think I'm better. Good. Okay. So, you know, the key here is that it's very individualized, and what I might feel and what Leslie might feel, thanks Dan, um, is, you know, very different. And so it's one of the reasons why we use it. You know, a lot of people will use heart rate, and if you read my emails, which you probably don't, you'll often see me kind of like trick in a little bit of a bit about heart rate. And heart rate and RPE are very closely correlated, and they do make a lot of sense together. So a lot of people who use heart rate training and try to sort of relate it to RPE, it actually makes a lot of sense. But for the sake of you know, large group training and talking to people who are varying paces, and this, like for the example of people on this call, everybody's very different pace wise, which is actually kind of good, and it illustrates this point very well, because what one person might perceive as difficult and what someone else might perceive as difficult are very different. So rather than specifically focusing on pace, and looking at these numbers, this is a way for us to talk about your perception of how you feel when you're doing it. So, you know, if you're absolutely exhausted, that might feel like a 9 to you, right? So if you're breathing really hard, you can't catch your breath, you're exhausted, you feel like you want to stop, that might be a 9. If you are going along, as Leslie might, for 10 hours, and like I could do this all day, that might be a 3 or a 4. And you can just keep going, and you can talk to people, and you know, might stop for a water break every now and then, but you can generally do this without noticing super heavy impact on how you feel and or your ability to continue. And so you'll hear us talk about it a lot, and you may say, hey, what happens between, let's say, 4 and 8, right? Because we don't necessarily talk a lot about what happens in there. And that is probably for many of us what starts to happen in a race and or in a long training run. And that is as we get higher up in mileage. So, you know, for a marathoner, it might be what, you know, starts to happen around mile 15 or 16. For a half marathoner, it might be what starts to happen around mile, you know, 8 or 9. And it's literally as your body begins to like, you know, it's getting a little harder. I'm starting to feel it a little bit. It might start to make your brain say, hey, I want to slow down, that kind of thing. So if you really look at what we put in here as far as, you know, if you look at the very top of this chart, you'll see, you know, our description of it, which is, you know, fairly obvious, what you might say, and that is literally, you know, how we might conversationally talk about it. And then as you breathe, how you're feeling cardiovascularly, right? Like, how is it hard for me? Am I okay? Can I catch my breath? Can I continue to do this for a period of time, et cetera? And then of course, talking, like, you know, do we run with people? Are we running next to somebody? Can I have a conversation with them? Can I, you know, talk about my day, or am I simply going to talk about the fact that I'm looking for the next water stop, that kind of thing. If you talk about heart rate, you may then get into the next column, which is VO2 max. And then same thing with threshold speed. It is a relation to heart rate. And then of course the next column is heart rate, right? And so for many of us, if you correlate that properly, it makes total sense, right? So at a 9, you're at about 95% of your heart rate. Like it's starting to hurt, like it really is hard. And then of course the description, and then a race intensity. And this is just where it might help you to sort of relate it to how you might perform at a specific RPE at a specific distance, right? So you're not going to run a marathon at a 10. It just, you won't be able to do it, right? It'll only last a certain period of time. So, yeah. So as we look at this, it does help us get to this next slide, which is a pace chart, right? Because at the end of the day, I get it. We all wear watches, myself included, and you want to begin to focus on pacing, because that does come into play as, of course, as we do our races, and we want to know our time. How can we perform at a certain distance? So you'll see here where we talk about goal time, the hopefully you guys can see my logic here. But the darker orange horizontal rows are the different goal times for marathon. It'll say full. The lighter orange rows are the goal times for the half marathon. And then as you get into the vertical columns, you'll see where we get into the race pace, which is those paces, the race pace for those specific goal times. But then you'll see us sort of break that down to 5K pace, a 10K pace, and a long, slow distance pace. And what does that mean? Again, if you were doing those 5K, you would be about 50 to 60 seconds faster than your race pace for a marathon or half marathon, again, depending on this column. 10K pace, 30 to 40 seconds faster. And then, of course, a long, slow distance pace, you'd be 30 to 60 seconds slower. And again, you might say, well, why slower, right? Like, why do we run our long miles at a much slower pace? It's the recovery. So if you go back to what Laura talked about, and she focused a lot on your ability to tear down and break down muscle tissue and your ability to rebuild that, that's where the recovery phase comes in. And even though a long, slow distance training, run or walk is meant to build our base, it also allows us a bit of recovery, but it can do both at the same time. So it's very important that you follow that 30 to 60 seconds slower rather than go out and say, hey, you know, I'm going to go out, I feel pretty good, I'm going to blow the doors off here. And then another important piece here is that 5K pace, that 10K pace, that now you can relate back to the Grand Prix that we're doing this season as we play around with some of these race distances and use those race distances to work on our race pacing. And now I give you back a much more talented and lovely person, Laura Lucan.
Okay. So just to sum it all up, kind of what we've talked about, if you look at a full training season, so again, this is an example of, would be an example of like for the pig, right? Where we start, you have our different phases. This is all of the concept of periodization, where we have our base, our endurance, our speed, our race prep, and then our taper to our race. You can see the different microcycles within that. This is usually about a 16 or 17 week plan. So we have weeks in there. The volume, right? So L is low, M is medium, H is high. And so this is an example with a 2-week taper, 2.5 week taper really. And then the intensity, right? How intense our workload is going to be. It also shows you different races, right? It says competition here. So again, you see March, we always do the Heart Mini. So that's where the Heart Mini would be. And then the pig would be the A race, right? So you have your A race and your B race. And that's how you put a training schedule all together. There's a little bit, you know, it's not as easy as it sounds, and there's a little bit more ta-da, there's a little bit more work that goes in that's involved, but we hope that this kind of gives you some insight to the method behind our madness, mostly Rick's madness. And I think with that we have about 10 minutes left, so we can open it up for any questions, or if you want to see any of the slides again. Again, this will be available on our YouTube video, so you can review the slides if you ever want to go back and look at them.
Oh, hey, Will.
Hey, a question. So what are we targeting, since every race has been canceled? What are we targeting?
I like Caroline's. Sorry, that was funny.
I was to Will.
So does that make sense to everybody? Like, we wanted to kind of illustrate how things are set up so that when you're seeing this, it's not completely illogical. One of the things I wanted to point out was, as Laura was talking about it, there was this is 4 to 6 weeks, and this is 4 to 6 weeks, and this is 2 to 3 weeks, et cetera. It'd be about a 29-week training program. Obviously, there's some overlap as things sort of build on each other, and we sort of introduce some things as the season goes along. We introduce things, we sort of dabble in. We'll throw in some speed, we'll throw in some intensity, that kind of a thing. And the hills, as we opened, talking about hill repeats, the hills, and again, God love you if you paid attention to my emails, but we talk a lot about how they build speed and power, or strength and power. And Laura mentioned that a little bit, is like, even though we think of hills and we think, it's kind of more, like it's kind of lumbering up the hill and much more intensity than it is speed, they really do contribute to our ability to build speed, because it builds so much strength. And again, that power piece, that ability to sort of, push off and, we'll say, get that next step, if you will, is where we get so much of our speed from. So all these things come into play as we go through the season. And we just want to kind of give you a better idea of why we do it, how it comes into play, and then, of course, the benefits that it has as far as racing and training overall. Just helping to build a stronger runner / walker. So now, I know Caroline has like 8 or 9 questions. I'm going to let others add. Oh, look at Dan. Nice. Dan dropping down at Bordeaux right in the middle of this. This is fantastic. Sorry. All right. Oh, look, and let's see what Will's got. It may or may not have been a beer. Oh, yeah, it is. Look at that. Gavel banger. Nice. All right. Anybody have any questions? Talk. And you can just talk, too, about like some of your experience. Like, I like Paul's experience running downhill, because I've never done that race. I know, John Vergie's done it. Laura Petra's done it, right? Chris Jenkins has done it. I know Petra did it. And it's a beast. I'll never forget actually watching John Vergie do that race, and I'll never forget, like, he was so fast in the first like 19, 20 miles, and then you could just see not that he had a fantastic race. He broke 3 hours, but you could just see it change dramatically as soon as he got down that hill. It just, like, I don't say the wheels came off, but they kind of came off, and he slowed down dramatically. But yeah, it was hot too. It was because the same year you did it, Paul, right?
He was out, him and Mary both were out there together.
You're muted. Sorry.
Am I muted? It should be working. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, maybe Rick can't hear me, but yeah, they were both
Rick.
there.
Rick, can you hear me?
Sorry.
We can't
Sorry.
hear it, Leslie.
Yeah, it's interesting because again,
Leslie, you're muted.
say it again.
Leslie's muted.
Oh, Leslie's muted now. Yeah. I just want to hear Leslie talk.
I know. Was I supposed to be saying something?
I just wanted to hear you say something nice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. But yeah, it's, so again, you can train your body to do certain things. One of the reasons why we include these different workouts, why we don't just focus on, good news, bad news, we don't do hill repeats, every other week, for example. There's reasons why we do these different things. And that is, at the end of the day, we want to most races, you can kind of call in a lot of what we do as far as training goes, right? You're going to use your hill work, you're going to use some of your speed work. And then as and you'll see me mention as well in the emails, and if we were in person, you'd see me or hear me mention it then. But you'll see as we introduce like these workouts to the long miles on Saturdays, is that it gives us a little bit of that taste of, and I'll specifically use Laura's terms because it is what matters, is essentially speed or going faster or even doing mileage at all on tired legs, right? Like, so as you get later in the race, we've all encountered it. I don't know that there's anybody here, unless somebody wants to say that's them, that, at 20 miles in a marathon or at, 10 miles in a half marathon, that you're not tired, right? I mean, we get tired. And as you get tired, what typically begins to fail first, of course, is speed. But why does that fail? Form, right? Our form starts to alter pretty dramatically because we can't hold our bodies as upright. We can't use the same power that we had previously. So what we're essentially training our bodies to do is accept the distance, the speed, and that power that happens later in the race. We try to essentially push that metric further down the path, right? So instead of feeling it, let's say at 20 miles in a marathon, we want to feel it at 24 miles in a marathon. We don't want to feel it at mile 20. We want to feel it at mile 24. So it gives us that opportunity to call back a little bit more of that all that training that we've had and say, I feel okay at mile 24. Like, I don't feel like garbage. I can actually do this for another couple miles. It's a lot harder to talk ourselves into 6 more miles of pain than it is to maybe talk ourselves into 2 more miles of pain, right? I mean, it's just the way it works. So, again, that's the rhyme and the reason behind everything. I hope it makes sense. I'm sure that listening to Laura was much more pleasant than listening to me, but this is what you get. Anybody have any questions, thoughts, something to share? Leslie, I know everyone wanted to hear you talk.
Caroline was the one that she had a million questions.
I know, Caroline, make something up.
All of my questions were answered appropriately
By
via
Laura.
the presentation and by Laura. And you helped. You were instrumental in answering my questions.
Sure.
Dan started to ask a question. Do you want to ask
Yeah,
Dan?
Dan, get in
Yeah, I
there.
got a question. So, all these races being canceled, and so I'm not really following a program, except for the program you have, which I think is great.
Boy, you dug yourself out of that hole, Dan.
But I did hurt my ankle too. Jen has helped me out on that. So, but I'm interested in endurance and speed, those two things. So as far as your program goes, I'm trying to follow what due daily, but what should I focus on?
Well, so good or bad, if you're not specifically targeting a race at the end, but you want to focus on endurance and speed, you really are. I mean, a marathon training program, and I know you're more marathoner than half marathoner and or Ironman distance. You're getting that endurance and that speed. The only thing you might want to focus on a little bit, you're getting the endurance by simply, doing the longer mileage on Saturdays, and maybe the only thing I might tell you differently is that you might want to add 1 day a week where you might have an easy 4 or 5 miles. In other words, the training program or the training schedule we send out usually has Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. So, it might be 4 to 5 days a week. You might want to look at 5 to 6 days a week of running instead. Does that make sense? So in other words, you might want to add some easy mileage. That will help with the endurance. So you're building a bigger base, right? I mean, endurance is essentially that base. And then as far as speed goes, you may want to tweak that. Instead of doing, let's say on a Friday, you may want to do a little bit harder run. So if you're mixing that, let's say with cross training, or you may even want to do that on, give me a second here to navigate through days. You don't want to do it on a Wednesday following a workout. And you don't want to do it a Monday prior to a workout. Again, if you're following the actual program, I mean, Friday is your best day. So you kind of have to think about where your focus is. But Fridays tends to be a nice day to add a little bit more speed. Not doing an 8-mile speed workout, but a little bit of speed, a little bit of power mixed in. And then you pop into your long miles on Saturday, which gives you that I'm running on tired legs piece, right? So you'd have 2 speed days a week, Tuesday and Friday, and then longer miles on Saturday, some recovery on Monday and Thursday. And, the other thing you might do is instead of just, adding another full day, let's say of endurance, meaning just miles, add 1 or 2 miles on Monday and add 1 or 2 miles on Thursday to that distance, just to get a bigger bulk of mileage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I was thinking about speed on Tuesday and then like a longer distance on Thursday.
Say it
Does that
again.
make sense? Like speed on Tuesday and then a longer distance on Thursday.
Yeah.
Because I typically run 3 days.
Okay. You run Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are doing it that way, then I would focus, if you're not going to add another day of speed, what I will tell you, and I'm not picking on you because you're running 3 days. Here's what I would tell you about that. Tuesday's great for speed. I agree with you that you can do a little bit longer on Thursday and then of course long on Saturday, right? That makes complete sense. I would probably add a 4th day of running. I think that's
Okay.
what you may be missing. And it may sound like, oh, well, that's going to maybe take away from your biking or maybe take away from your swimming or something else you're doing. But it will actually help you a lot because it'll help you build the base that you're not necessarily getting because you're not getting enough days, therefore you're not getting enough miles. A great example of this actually is Joe. I don't want to pick on him because he's not on this call, but Joe Fernandez. He used to run 2 days a week. He used to run Tuesdays and Saturdays, and that was it. And he kind of just plateaued. He wasn't not a good runner. He just plateaued. He just kind of couldn't, everything was kind of the same. And as soon as he took that to about 4 days a week running, then he of course jumped to like 5 or 6 days a week. But when he took that from like 2 days a week to 4 days a week, he saw a dramatic improvement in his overall performance. It doesn't have to be brutal miles. It just helps to get that additional base in there. So again, if you're doing Tuesday speed, you're doing Thursday longer, doing Saturday longer, I might add in, either a Monday or a Friday and, like just an easier, 4 to 5 miles to start and then build a little bit of tempo into that, into the middle of it, just to get a little bit of speed, just to get your body moving a little bit. And I think that may make a difference. I really do. I think 3 days for what you are trying to get out of it, I think 3 days isn't enough.
Too short?
Did you say, am I sure?
I said, is 3 days too short?
Yeah, I just think you're not getting enough miles.
I
I don't
get
think
that
you're.
now.
Yeah, I don't think you're getting the benefit. And let me say it a different way. That doesn't need to take a Thursday run of like 5 or 6 miles to like 12. That's not the way to get it back, right? You're better off dividing that into a couple of days because you don't want to overtax your body on Thursday, then go and do it again on Saturday. You want to give your body enough time to recover. So I think one more day of 4, 5, 6 miles will have a nice impact, at least to start, and see how you feel when you're doing like 4 days a week instead of 3.
I get that. I like that. I think I'll try it because usually I'm a better swimmer and usually I swim 3 days a week and I don't need to swim 3 days a week. I'm a worse runner, so I need to improve on my
I
running.
mean, I think for what knowing what I know about you and your history, I think what you would accomplish more by getting that extra day of running. I really think you'll do better with that.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else? I know Caroline feels everything was answered. Leslie's happy as a bug. If you haven't watched Leslie's yoga poses from, is it yesterday? I think it was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I want to see the handstand again. Why don't
I
you do
didn't
it
That was
now?
impressive.
I didn't know I was going to get such a reaction. I
It was
didn't
good.
feel like it was that big a deal.
It
It was really impressive.
Pretty
It
big
was
deal.
good. I was literally
can't
watching you do the
One
hand.
foot.
I was watching you do the handstand, and I was just like, I will never be able to do that ever in my entire life because I'm not allowed to use my wrist that way. I would snap my wrist in half. But like watching you do that, I was like, wow, that's bizarre. Like how stable it was. Like as it went like up, I was like, wow. I wanted to feel like you're very strong, but I felt like I'd be over complimenting you, so I got nervous.
It's all right. I can handle it.
It was good.
You can say it. I can handle it.
It was really good.
I got to that point of doing handstands by adding an extra day. I moved up from 4 to 3. 4 from
Did you?
3.
Days
From
of
3 to 4?
handstanding or running?
Yeah, I'm confused.
Never mind. It was a bad joke. Look at Mike. That was a very Mike joke, and he knows it.
It was. That's why Mike has this.
Look at his face. He's like, oh my God, I would totally say that.
It was a nice effort.
It was great. I
Yeah.
liked it. The
Okay, I do have a
delivery was
question. I'm going to
the
ask a real
delivery was
question.
fabulous.
Thanks. Yeah,
It
I
was
tried.
really good.
My question is about hill repeats. And when I do hill repeats, I'm like dying. Like I'm gonna collapse in death at the end of every repeat. So if
On the uphill.
on the well, yeah, I hope so.
I'm just asking. I mean, fair question.
Like I am maxed out, and I'm not even running like that fast. So for hill repeats, and I think I've talked to Laura about this before, but it's been years. Should my focus be more on keeping the effort at that 80% or whatever it was it said on the slide, or pace? Like if if my pace is going down and I'm at
Effort.
80, so if I keep my effort level the same and with each repeat my pace goes down, should I continue doing them, or should I be like this? I should call it because
No effort. So I here's the other thing. I think, and I'll pick on you because I know you. Is I think the other thing is really focus on form. Like I really think about how you are running up the hill.
I
And I'm not-
try, but it's so hard.
It sucks. I mean, Caroline can vouch. When Caroline and I did those hill repeats 6.5 months ago, when I thought I
It
was
was
going to collapse.
embarrassing. We were all just both.
No, you were fine. I was embarrassing. I couldn't keep up with anything. But I think the key, Leslie, is
Oh, you froze.
What happened to Rick? Where's Rick?
He was going to say the
Let's
key,
all-
Leslie, is
Rick needs that upgrade his
Is-
technology.
and this kind of goes for my back. Am I back? Am I back? Hold
you're
on.
back.
You're back now.
Now you're back. Yeah.
I don't know what happens there. So I think it's really is a form thing, and I'm not picking on you, but I'm just talking about in general. If you really focus on form, interestingly enough, because you're going uphill, you're obviously going a little slower than you would be going, at other times, right? So really think about driving with your legs and using your butt and your upper leg to literally drive like I always say that, like the piston, like push down, like really drive and get up on your feet and go but bam, 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 bam. And it really, I know it sounds stupid, but I think psychologically, I really do think it helps a lot. And do not focus on pace so much and just think about that effort. And
Right.
as you use your body, that effort in a funny way, you're taking that effort away from, again, the breathing and everything else, and you're using your body, your legs, and you're strong, you're muscular from, again, whether it be from yoga and running or yoga or running or both. You're strong enough that you can do that and use your body to absorb the difficulty, not your cardio. That makes sense. So
Yeah, but
I
after
understand.
putting that
I
into
understand your
play,
point, and I understand your pace may suffer, but effort. I mean, just effort. Don't overdo
So-
it. Don't.
So if I'm on my 6th repeat out of 8, and
Yeah.
I'm now at a slower pace than I would normally run up a hill, not on a hill repeat day,
Yep.
I should just keep going?
Finish
Because I
it.
feel like at some point, like
As long as. But again, focus on form. If you pay attention to the form, you're better off going. If your form completely breaks down, like if it just starts to fall apart, that's different. Right? If it just completely, like you're just lumbering up and you're like, oh my God, you're halfway up the hill and you're leaning forward and, your arms are flailing all over the place. I mean, that's different. But if you're able to hold your form and think about, again, how you're doing it, that will translate down the road. Like that will help you as you do these the next time. And as you do these the next time, and then someday when you're out just on a regular run, you're running uphill, you'll be like, oh, this makes sense now. Like I feel a little stronger going up here. And it's very easy to to give up because like, oh God, I just looked at my watch. I went from a, 8.5 minute mile to a 9 minute mile going up this hill. Who cares? It's a quarter mile, right? Like, don't think about your pace in this tiny, finite window. Think about effort.
Yeah.
How am I doing it? How do I look? How does it feel? How's my body going as I'm going up this hill? It really does make a difference how you're physically doing it, not just pace. It as crazy as it sounds, like I went running tonight and I went completely by feel. I wasn't doing hills by any stretch, but I mean, I went completely by feel. It helped dramatically that it was like 70% humidity or 60% humidity outside, versus 110% humidity. But I mean, I felt fantastic. I mean, I was doing 730 miles and I was just like, oh, this feels great, like totally fine. But it was like, I ran totally by feel. I mean, I could have cared less what my pace was. I was just like, this feels great because of the weather primarily. It was what it was making me feel so good. But again, if you think about your body and how you're doing it, that's where the effort really comes into place. Don't look at your watch. It kind of doesn't matter, right? Because it's about the power and the muscle and the way you're doing it that will help build enough strength that, again, these are the benefits that pay off in a long run, in a race and in longer distance stuff.
Yeah,
That
I
makes
know
sense?
that. I know all that logically, but actually doing that.
Or you can just have Caroline come and stand there with you and she'll just scream at you and yell at you and say you suck, like she did with me. And it
Very
was,
encouraging.
She'll be like, come on, sweetie, you can do it.
yeah, it's okay. She'll probably run up the hill holding your hand with a plastic bag over her hand. It'll be lovely. Yeah. But honestly, focus on form. Don't pay as much attention to pace. Form and effort. It makes a big difference. It really does.
Can't wait for the next round.
Sure. Yeah, I totally believe that.
I like hill repeats, but
I do
not
too.
in the summer, basically.
Yeah, I don't
do
either.
too.
I don't like anything in the summer. All right. Anyone else?
Yeah, what were you doing? I saw you on Madison running the wrong way against traffic out in the lane. What was that all about?
Today,
Today.
were you impressed at how fast I was going? Two things. One, I always run against traffic. I almost always run against traffic, primarily because I can see what's coming towards me. And now, good or bad, Mike Sturwald called me out on this. It was really funny. He's like, why the hell are you in the road? But I'm typically avoiding somebody on the sidewalk, literally because I'm trying to avoid I'll say the 6 foot rule, but I'm literally trying to avoid people on the sidewalk. So whenever I see anybody on the sidewalk, I immediately go into the street and I will run around till I can cleanly get back up onto the sidewalk and get around them.
I just happened to see you when I was driving down there, and you were in the lane.
I saw you. I saw it. You were coming. It was probably
I was
right down the
coming
square coming.
the opposite way. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I run. The only time I'm in the street is when I'm trying to avoid somebody on the sidewalk. And when I say avoid, I'm just trying to give them the clear path, if that makes sense. So my version of social distancing is getting in the street. And the reason that's the reason I run against traffic, is because if I hop into the street, I can see what's coming towards me, right? If I hop into the street and there's a car behind me, I can't see it. And I'll probably get lit up.
But also, I just like giving you a hard time.
No, I totally get it. I'm guessing everyone on this call would agree. It's totally fine. But it's actually a good question, but it's the reason, it's why I'm doing it. I know it sounds weird, but like I've had so many people. I was at a light the other day getting ready to cross the street, and I was just like waiting at the light. I'm just like standing there. And I mean, I literally turned around. There was a guy on a bike and he was this close to me. I mean, he was like literally right, like his bike wheel was like almost touching my leg. And I turned around and I was like, holy crap. Like, I mean, first of all, it startled the hell out of me. The obvious other thing is like the guy's riding a bike and he's on the sidewalk, which just startled me. But I mean, the guy just had no like social, and I'm not talking about in the time of a pandemic. I'm just saying like no social like courtesy whatsoever. I mean, the guy was like on top of me and it just startled me. And I was just like, dude, like, like cut it for a minute. So it's my version of trying to be respectful and thoughtful to people who are on the sidewalk. So but that's why I run against traffic. There you go. Rules of the road.
Good deal.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got one. This is Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
So the slides you gave the really good high-level overview on how the training program's put together, and then obviously you give the weekly workouts and the monthly calendar. I'm just curious, how far in advance do you pick a given workout for a given day? And how do you choose it between, say, the week before or the week after? Like, how do you get to that level of detail? Like what, how does that work?
So
Because it seems to me, for example, like there was the slide showing the different phases and the general types of workouts you do in those phases.
Mhm.
Well, within the phase, how do you plan, I guess, is my question.
So it will typically be, especially in the beginning, it's things that will allow us to, especially in the beginning, is things, when I say things, meaning workouts that will allow us to get people out on the road, start to introduce speed and pacing and all these things without overtaxing, right? Like you want to be able to get somebody out and do a quote unquote workout. I don't know if you can see me, Aaron, but I'm assuming you can. You know, I'm using my little air quotes here, but you know, do a workout without completely blowing people up, you know, week 2, week 3, that kind of thing. So a lot of this, you know, and if you look back over the seasons, you know, there's striking similarities, of course. You know, we use a lot of the same structure week over week. What we will do, and it's a good question, is like, you know, how might we add a new workout into a month or into a certain, like you said, a phase. And that is, you know, you look at how it can benefit you, and Laura talked a little bit about it as well, how it can benefit you for a specific race. So, you know, in the spring, we pick the pig, right? It has more hills, so we might choose a little more hill workouts. In the fall, where it might be a flatter race, we'll choose more speed and more like tempo type workouts where it's focusing a little bit on just like leg turnover and like getting moving because you're on more flats, right? But we tend to follow a pattern until we, when I say we experiment a little bit, season over season, we'll introduce a little bit different workouts or a little bit different, like it might still be a fartlek, but we might have a slightly different fartlek. What you will notice as those build over the season, to kind of answer your question, like how do we pick one, specifically with fartleks is a great example, is that the intensity will pick up and the recovery within a fartlek will actually shorten, right? So let's say it's a quarter mile, your quarter miles will be quick, you know, fast pace, and you might shrink to a quarter mile. As you get further along in the season, you will shrink that from, like, say, quarter mile, I'll say 1/8 of a mile, right? So your recovery will actually be shorter. So you're doing more intensity, less recovery, which trains the body to accept that speed. So as the season goes along, specifically when it comes to workouts, recovery gets shorter, intensity grows. And, you know, again, the pattern is very similar season over season, but we try to introduce things that will challenge you and help you to build that. I use the word power a lot, but to me, power is strength and speed sort of combined. And, you know, I think that we don't.
And I'm guessing too that part of it is you're picking workouts that keep things fresh and exciting.
Of course, yeah,
So you
for
don't,
sure.
so you don't want to do, you know, hills, fartlek, just repeating. Even if there are
course.
variations on hills and fartleks, you still like that variety. So
Yeah, I mean, good or bad, my wife's going to jump in with something too.
So you asked how long in advance you actually pick the workout. So we actually build out the entire calendar from the beginning. So we'll know that on, you know, the Tuesday of week 12, there are going to be fartleks, or on the Tuesday of week 3, there's going to be a tempo run. But then the specifics of that, right? So what kind of fartlek? Is it going to be like, for example, the rainbow fartleks, or is it going to be, 90-second intervals or, whatever, that is built in kind of more at the month level because it's, allows for the flexibility to see what other kind of variables are in play. For example, weather is often a big factor. And so we might have to pick things that are better suited to a certain type of route. When you get more to the individual person, it allows for flexibility to see how a person is adapting to the training. That doesn't really work on a group level, right? But you actually can see how group mentality, right, is kind of adapting to the training. We can, Leslie and Mike and Rick and I have conversations about how this specific season felt this way, or this specific season felt this way. So to answer your question, it's all built out, but the specifics of what that track workout or what that hill workout or what that fartlek workout is going to look like is dynamic up until, kind of usually the month level, and then even sometimes down to the week level if we need to change it.
Okay, that makes sense.
And to ever so slightly expound on that, I'm not going to go into too much detail at all, but the other thing we try to be careful of, so for example, in a say hill repeats, if we do 6 hill repeats, there's a reason why we specifically use like 6 hill repeats week 1. Oh, sorry guys, hold on, my computer just freaked out. So there's a reason why we use, like, let's say hill repeats for the marathon group, week 1 versus 9 or versus 3. But you'll also notice when we go from the first week of hill repeats to several weeks later going to the second version of hill repeats, we jump by 2 or 3. We don't jump by 7, right? Like, because you don't want to overtax it and your body can't accept it the same way. So there is some logic that goes into it and some planning to make sure we don't overdo it or underdo it as we go along. Does that help?
Yeah, I think so. Yep. Thank you.
If it doesn't, you can ask, send me a message either way.
Yep, no
Ask
problem.
next, whatever. Sorry. Hopefully it helps. All right. Anybody else have any questions, thoughts? Good. All right, guys. Well, I hope everyone has a good week. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to join us on Thursday if you like to watch Caroline in a lace pillow. And she typically will have a glass of wine. Leslie has, I think, something to say.
That's not as creepy as it sounds, guys. Come on.
Yeah. It did sound
Yeah,
like-
sorry, I made it sound like something really
It
weird
did
was
sound
going
really
on.
weird.
We're
Sorry.
trying
I
to
just have a
encourage
lace pillow.
out with us.
Trying to encourage participation, not creep people out.
Yeah.
But yeah, join us on Thursday at 7:30 p.m., not 8:30, but 7:30 p.m. if you'd like. Otherwise, have a good week. Enjoy your workout tomorrow. And we will see you again next week. Take care, guys.
You,
Thanks.
Lucians.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
See y'all.
See you, Paul.